I did my book talk on I See What You Mean, Visual Literacy K through 8 by Steve Mullen. I really like this book because it started by explaining why this might be important to teachers. So Mullen kind of went over how visuals are everywhere in the world, especially today. They're in technology, they are in public, children's books, just everywhere that kids look, they see visuals. But the language of visual literacy actually needs to be taught to children. Even though we can interpret what something is when we look at it, we definitely need to teach kids how to look at all aspects of a picture or all aspects of a diagram. So Mullen kind of describes visual literacy as a complementary skill to reading. He goes over how basically even if students are non-readers or non-writers, they can express ideas and understand ideas through visual literacy. So he goes over several purposes for visual literacy. One of them is to integrate literacy into curriculum areas like math, science, or history. He also talks about motivating students who otherwise would not want to write or read, and expanding the repertoire of what children can do and how they can express what they know in the classroom. So Mullen goes on to explain why should we learn visual literacy or teach visual literacy. Well, he says that reading images is kind of like how we read books. So think about like when you go to the library and you get a book on dinosaurs. If you were looking for information on pterodactyls, you would probably go to the front of the book and look for the page where pterodactyls were and flip to that page. So basically, when we read a book for information, we skip around. We go throughout the book. We sometimes even skip around the page looking for the specific fact that we want. So this is called selective reading. And Mullen says that when people look things up on the internet, they browse the internet for a reason. They're basically doing selective reading. So not only is this how we typically read today, but it's also how people get their information. So when someone looks at an image, like even just the image right here of these books, you can tell that they're in a stack. They're probably maybe novels or research books. They don't look like children's books. I'm making some inferences just from what I see in the picture. So basically, reading images is kind of like reading books because you take the information that you see or that you need. So the big why for this, or why this can be good in the classroom, is because Mullen introduces the idea of recomposing. He says recomposing is simply reading information in one format and summarizing it in another format. So for example, let's say the book on dinosaurs that I got at the library, maybe I find some really cool facts about all the body parts of a T-Rex. So then I go and create a diagram of a T-Rex and I label all of the parts of the T-Rex. Then when I'm about to write my paper on T-Rex, I have that format to help me. So essentially, when kids recompose something, it makes it kind of impossible for them to copy it straight from a book. They can still obviously write down word for word what's in that book, but typically if they're taking the text and creating some sort of visual, they're recomposing it into something that works for their mind. So thinking must occur to create this new format. And furthermore, when they go from their new format to their actual finished product, whether that be like an essay or something online like a Storybird story or any of those things that we had learned in the IT class, they then again need to think for that learning to occur. It's not something they can just copy down. So how are we going to do this? The second part of the entire book is explaining how. And I really appreciated that because this is my biggest question, how are we going to teach kids visual literacy? For me, at least, I think visual literacy is kind of one of those things that's difficult to teach because it's difficult to explain. So I really liked how Mullen broke down all these different types of visuals that we can teach kids and reasons why they might be important. So this picture right over here is a killer whale, And it's actually a simple diagram because it just shows a picture and then it gives some labels. So that's considered a simple diagram. There's all other types of visuals as well, which I'm going to go over. And basically, all of them have to have graphic design elements, which is a whole other thing that kids learn through observing and then also through making their own images. So like I had said before, a simple diagram is basically a picture with words, and these two things work together to make meaning. So right over here, you'll see a simple diagram of a bee and then of a whale shark. And these are both examples from kids. And I love that about this book because Mullen actually uses examples from either a classroom that he's been in to teach or teachers have sent him. So that's pretty cool. So simple diagrams are to similar to other diagrams, but they basically just focus on one piece of information. So they're not focusing on, where does the animal live? Like you don't see any background here, you just see like white. You don't see like any texture, anything like that. It's just like one piece of information. And it basically just simplifies the image to show that one aspect. So it doesn't want to like overload the child with a bunch of information that they don't need. Instead, it gives the reader just like one part of information that they can use to then learn more about the subject. So in this case, bees or sharks. Now, an analytic diagram is a little bit different. So it's really simple or similar to a simple diagram, but it focuses usually on something that's close up or even crossing through an image. So like this picture up here is of a watch, and it's actually like a cross through, like someone cut it open, and it shows all the different parts of a watch. And same thing, this is a cherry and it's like in half and it shows the different parts of a cherry. Instead, they might also have a close-up of like an animal to show texture of the fur or something like that. So typically these are used in technology, science, or health to show more details, like a closer up detail that you wouldn't see in a simple diagram. Maps, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about maps because most people know what they already are, but basically they show spatial conditions, and it doesn't just have to be a map. It can also be something to instruct, so that's what I really liked. On these two examples, one is of a bedroom and one is of a house. So the children in these two examples were drawing what they think their house or their bedroom looks like, and it's more of like a plan in this situation, but it can also be for geography. So maps don't have to just be for geography. They can be to get out information in a different way, like to map a bedroom. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Process diagrams, I love these. I think this is what I've been really trying to use in my classroom. So essentially, they are a kind of synthetic diagram. So synthetic diagrams make connections with information. Process diagrams can be timelines, storyboards, or flowcharts, and they help explain, instruct, and discuss while retelling information. So right over here you can see the timeline that this student made. And basically, they say that in 2001 they were born, and then they give one big event from each year that they remember. So they end in 2011 with, "I got my first piece of art into a real gallery." So this is kind of like their own life timeline. But of course, you can use timelines for history, especially for science, for basically anything to explain the sequence of events. And that's the same with storyboards. So storyboards could even be like a comic book, which I know I've tried to use in my classroom, and those have been really cool and helpful for lots of kids as well. Structure diagrams are another type of synthetic diagram, kind of like the process diagrams. And they can be web diagrams, tree diagrams, tables, or Venn diagrams. So I know a lot of us probably use Venn diagrams, but it was really interesting to see some other types of diagrams. So this is kind of like a web diagram because they use lots of arrows to link ideas together. I know that we've done some of that in one of our research classes as well. So I thought it was really cool to just give kids some ideas like this and then let them go for it. So that's something I'm definitely going to be trying out in my own classroom. Now, the book kind of ends talking about graphs and graphic design. So I didn't spend too much time talking about graphs because basically those are the graphs that we teach and that we know. So simple graphs, bar graphs, line graphs, and pie charts. If we want to show information somehow, we show it with the graph typically if it's like numbers or data, right? So the book just kind of talked about something simple for kids to do with graphs was just to like sketch them out, especially using the elements of graphic design. So graphic design is important for everything. It's important for all types of visuals that I talked about previously. And I'm going to not really go over it too much since I'm running out of time, but essentially graphic design is how it looks and why it looks like that. Does this medium make sense? Does their information come across to the reader? And if so, does it do it in a good way? So the book ends by saying, how can we put this all together? So how can we as teachers take this information and teach it in our own classrooms, right? So recomposing is obviously going to help kids learn on that deeper level, get more of like a deep learning experience. So the book kind of gives lessons that each grade level could teach to kind of get kids just playing around with visual literacy. So one of them was in third grade, Dinosaurs and Owner's Manual, and it talks about having kids research dinosaurs, make several visual literacy like maps and diagrams, and then giving them the prompt of, okay, like how do you take care of a pet dinosaur? What would you do? Explain it in some way. So basically kids get to choose from their repertoire, like their whole toolbox of visual literacy strategies, what they want to do to show the reader how to take care of a dinosaur. So I thought that was pretty cool. Over here is an example from the second grade. It talks about dolphins, and they made a glossary for dolphins with some pictures and some, it looks like maybe even like a web over here, a web diagram. So the author also kind of ends with some tips for teachers. He says start with some short tasks, go through different ways to make different visuals. Don't just dump it on kids all at once, and that's pretty obvious. Allow students to reference examples. So I liked that he gave all these examples because it could even be something that teachers print out and put around their classroom for kids to reference while they're working. He also said having kids work in pairs to start when we're doing something like this is great, and then after a while they can kind of, gain that independence and that freedom. And then letting kids choose their theme within reason. So, like if it was about dinosaurs, let them choose what kind of dinosaur they want to have as their pet. Or if it is about dolphins, let them choose, like, where does their dolphin live? What specifically do they want to focus on their dolphins? So, like here, they focused on anatomy. Maybe they want to focus on habitat words. So, basically, I'll give, let's see, the works cited for this book, I See What You Mean, Visual Literacy. And like I had said, I really enjoyed this book because it just gave so many tips, especially at the end. It was linking this person's experience, Steve Mullen's experience, to everything that he's seen in the classroom and all the research that he's done. So with recomposing and with visual images, kids are able to, first of all, learn on a deeper level, and then second of all, create visuals that make sense for them and other readers. So hopefully that made sense. I hope you enjoyed my book talk.